Hey everybody, this is Cannaday and this is Design Space, where I take a look at game design and how I designed my game Last Light. Tom asked me to do these videos and I'm super stoked to talk to you. Even though I'm not the end-all be-all of game design, I would like to share a little bit of knowledge that I've learned about game design in the industry. Today we're going to be talking about pitching your game and how to choose a publisher, and maybe even go a little bit into signing your first game. Pitching a game. So what is pitching a game? So basically, once you have your playtesting and prototyping and all of that stuff done, and you feel like your game is super solid, like solid enough to show to a publisher, that is when you go into pitching your game, which is basically going to be you showing your game to a publisher for them to potentially pick up and publish. So basically making a business deal with a publisher, and your game has to be super solid, good enough that it could make its own way onto the market and be something viable to sell for that publisher. And basically pitching is going to be you setting up a meeting with that publisher to sit down and give them at least an elevator pitch of what the game is like and why it would make a good fit for their company and stand apart on the market. So the first thing about pitching is you need to be able to have an elevator pitch. A lot of publishers, and you should be able to just be able to walk up to a publisher booth, and if you are able to like have time for the meeting, you should be able to do an elevator pitch for your game. Basically a super short, like less than 1 minute or around like just super tiny explanation of what your game is, why it's different, and why it would actually work in the marketplace, and the publisher would be able to actually sell the game, because that's really what the publisher is going to be all about, is how can the game actually be sold, how is it going to be popular, and how is it actually going to like help the publisher make money themselves if they're going to come into this business transaction with you. So like for Last Light, I'd be like, Last Light's a fast-paced space 4X game set right before the heat death of the universe. There's a bunch of different aliens that you're all trying to be. There's tons of different 4X space games out there, but the reason that Last Light stands apart is because it has a rotating board that changes up the areas that all the players are in, and then it's simultaneous action, so players are playing at the same time. Also, it plays in around an hour, and 4X games never play in around an hour, but it gives you the full 4X feeling because you're playing all of that at the same time. So being able to say something really quick about your game that not only tells why your game is different than other games, tells why your game is set apart, will also just help the publisher know, hey, this is something I'm interested in. And being able to show pictures or having a sell sheet, which a lot of designers will make sell sheets, will basically talk about the components of the game, talk about basically your little elevator pitch for the game, talk about player count and playtime, and being able to have a sell sheet to give out to the different publishers that you might be potentially looking at having a more formal meeting, or maybe a sit down for playing the game for a pitch, is a great thing to have for your game as well. And then don't go into long, big backstories on your game when you're talking to publishers about it. They don't necessarily need to know about like, oh, I've been designing this for like 8 years and like my kid came up with the idea and like it's been our passion thing. I mean, that's cool and all, but they really need to know why it's different and how they're going to be able to market and sell the game. And then definitely be talking about why your game is different. Why is it going to stand apart? Why is it better than the other games that are out there? I wouldn't be haughty or like boastful about any of that stuff, but just say why it's going to actually work, you know? And then demoing your game for the publisher. So after you've done that pitch, after hopefully your elevator pitch has garnered enough attention or garnered enough time, or maybe the publisher feels like, oh, well, this might be something we'd be interested in looking at, you can sit down and demo your game for the publisher and make sure that you know how to teach your game super well, and are able to affluently like do all the stuff. I know sometimes it's really hard, especially if you're not used to that sort of thing, to be nervous and all that stuff, and most publishers will understand that sort of thing. But being able to have your teach and your pitch and showing how the game works, I mean, the things you want to be talking about when you're demoing that game to the publisher are like how the mechanics are going to work and how your vision for the game is, and basically why players are going to love this, and how in playtesting everybody loves these things, you know, and how things are working really well for all of your playthroughs of the game. Talking about the wins that you had in playtesting is a really great thing to do, but you don't want to be like talking about, oh, this is this character and this is this backstory with this story with this thing. That's not what they're going to be focused on. It's going to be really very much like nuts and bolts of like why this game is going to be something that the publisher really wants to keep an eye on. And just, you need to be able to sell your own game, because if you can't sell your own game, it's going to be really hard for other people to sell your game. And I know that this takes a bit of charisma, and I know especially sometimes game designers might be a little bit more shy, a little bit more cerebral, and a little bit inside your own head trying to make all those cool mechanics for your game. But you either need to be able to figure out how to break out of your shell to be able to sell your game to the publisher, or find someone who knows your game really, really well that can help you pitch and just have that charisma and help bring that game to the market. So with Last Light, I definitely had a very interesting experience back in 2017 when I first had started, I playtested the game and it worked really well with my friends. I brought it to Gen Con and I set the game up right outside of the Board Game Geek area and had demoed it for some different people, just seeing how different like random strangers kind of like felt about the game. And then that same Gen Con, I hung out with the Plaid Hat guys a lot. I wanted to demo it for them, so I talked a couple of them into playing it. Normally just some of their playtesters, and Joe Ellis, who does a lot. He's actually designed for Plaid Hat now, and then does a lot of their website development and also does all their app games now. I played with these guys, and as I was playing, they were having such a fun time that Isaac Vega came up and was like, hey, you need to pitch this game to us. And I was just trying to get their opinion on the game, just trying to get playtests in, not even necessarily trying to sell the game to them, but everybody was having so much fun and it was so different for them that they really wanted to look in the game even more. And I ended up working and fixing the game up and ended up pitching it to Plaid Hat. I went to PAX Unplugged and basically showed it to Colby there. I basically set up the entire game in the middle of like the Asmodee booth and had everything set up and ready, and I just gave him the elevator pitch, very similar to what I gave you just a few minutes ago, and he basically told me that was the best pitch someone's ever given me for a game, just by how concise it was. And he's like, we're going to play this tonight. So I took it and I played it with Colby and Jerry Hawthorne and Emerson Matsuchi, and we all played the game together, and they gave me a little bit of feedback and stuff, and they said that they really liked the game and that they wanted to take it. And basically this is where I'm going to talk about like kind of like a first rights of refusal. So what first rights of refusal is when you have a publisher that you're showing a game and they basically you can either do a contract, or we just kind of did it like a verbal thing of like, hey, we want the game, don't show it to anybody else, and then we're going to be looking into signing it. And you do want to make sure to keep have timelines for those sort of things, and like be like, okay, well, I'm going to tweak this thing and do this thing and do this to this, and then show it back to you again, and then hopefully we can sign the contract then, and things like that. But I basically never got past that. I never got into any signing step with Plaid Hat. Basically, Plaid Hat ended up taking the game, and they said, hey, we really enjoy the game, but space themes haven't worked with us so much, which is really funny because they literally just announced a space game. So we're going to try to put it under the Fantasy Flight license. This was back when they were with Asmodee. And then they basically said, we're going to show this to Fantasy Flight and see if this would be something they would want to do in Cosmic Encounter or their Twilight Imperium IP. And Colby told me this at Gen Con the following year, and I was like, well, you better not mess this pitch up because this is a big deal. And he's like, do you want to be there while I do it? And I'm like, sure. So I went to this meeting where basically Plaid Hat was going to show Fantasy Flight, because Plaid Hat wanted Fantasy Flight to basically put their name on the game, but Plaid Hat was still going to do all the development for the game. So I sat there with Andrew Navarro and the current head of studio at Fantasy Flight and several other, Nate French and several other Fantasy Flight people there, and taught them Last Light and showed them the game. And Andrew Navarro was like over the moon with it. And Colby was trying to explain to them how they were going to develop it. And then Fantasy Flight was like, no, we'll take the whole thing. Like, we're going to make this game. We want it to be the next Twilight Imperium. We want it to be the next big thing. And Colby's like, well, I was thinking it could be more of like a Cosmic Encounter sort of thing. He's like, no, this is going to be great because this is going to be so much faster. And even in that thing, Colby was like, well, I don't know, with a like 1 hour playing 4X game, I don't know, like, who's ever, I mean, isn't gonna cannibalize your Twilight Imperium sales? And Andrew was like, it doesn't matter, like, we're gonna make this. I mean, it's gonna come out a little bit later, so it's not gonna be that big of a deal. So they were all gung-ho. They took my prototype, they took everything, and then Fantasy Flight had it for a while. They showed it to their marketing team, and showed it to like their production team, and we're talking about how much it was going to cost with all these 3D planets and rotating board and all that stuff. And they worked on it for a little while, and Andrew Navarro had left the studio, who was super excited about the game, and then ended up giving the game. After a while, they ended up like looking at it and then ended up giving the game back to me. This is also the same time Plaid Hat was looking at leaving Asmodee. This is also the same time that Asmodee or Fantasy Flight had done a ton of different layoffs, so they weren't really bringing in outside design. So it was just this whole weird. I was crying because I was so happy that it was going to be made by Fantasy Flight, and then I was crying on the other hand, being so sad that like the game was coming back to me. And I reached back out to Colby, and he's like, I don't really know what to do because we work for Asmodee and they gave you the game back, so we can't really do a whole lot with it. I do think Colby's maybe a little still salty that they didn't actually get the game. But then I had to go back out on the next PAX Unplugged, which was a few months later, and I pitched it to 3 more people. And all 3 of those publishers were very interested in the game. I pitched it to Arcane Wonders, I pitched it to Gray Fox, and I pitched it to Gamelin Games. Gamelin Games really makes tiny epic stuff, so they thought it would be more of a stretch for them, but they loved the gameplay. And they were still interested in maybe making sure I showed it to Michael, because I showed it to the other guys from the group. Arcane Wonders and Gray Fox both wanted to like make me an offer for the game. But I had more experience with Gray Fox, and I was really good friends with Josh, who's my current developer for the game. And so I ended up going with them and deciding that I wanted to do them because they really had a passion for making the game look exactly the way I wanted. They wanted the 3D planets, they wanted all that stuff. They didn't want to change up all of the different mechanics and things like that. So I went with Gray Fox, and I love how they've done the vision for that. So pitching can be a whirlwind because sometimes you pitch a game and publishers want it and things get passed around, which we'll talk a little bit about publishers as well. I do want to say I'm going to have to put my money where my mouth is for what to do for pitching, because I'm going to be pitching some other games here in a couple weeks as well. So hopefully that will go well as well. And a lot of it too is just being able to sell that game and show why it's different and why people are going to get excited for that game. So I do want to talk about publishers as well. So how do you find the right publisher? And this goes back to the first session I did on this, just talking about being knowledgeable about the industry, doing your research, like understanding what publishers publish what kind of games. I mean, Capstone makes tons and tons of Euro games, and say you have this super Ameritrashy game, you wouldn't really be trying to pitch that to a certain publisher, and then maybe they go outside of their normal wheelhouse. But also you should know what kind of games that publisher already has. They're not going to want to if they just published a game that has penguins in it, and you have a game that has penguins in it, you're not going to want to necessarily pitch to a company that has the exact same kind of game, unless maybe it would work good in a line of that same sort of game. There's all these different things, but you have to build those relationships to kind of understand what's going on there as well. So you have to make sure your game is a good fit with the publishers you're trying to pitch to. Also, you need to build connections with publishers and just build connections with people in the industry in general. Most of the people that I pitched to, I knew a bunch of the guys from Tiny Epic because I had done previews for their games and I talked to them and played lots of their games. I knew the guys from Plaid Hat because I had hung out, I had listened to their podcasts for forever. I just interacted with them a lot online and hung out with them at conventions, so it was easier for me to pitch to them. And then Gray Fox, I had Josh on my podcast, so I knew him from that. Also, my co-host I had demoed at their game, their tables before at Gen Con. So basically just being a part of the industry and building these connections and communications with people can give you more avenues of people who you can pitch your game to. Just because you're a part of the industry, you're making those relationships. And that's another thing I want to say is you need to go to conventions to build these connections. Networking is a huge thing in this industry, and the industry is pretty small overall. And if you're able to make friends and make networking and make connections, then you'll be able to have more opportunities to find publishers that are actually looking for the kind of game that you have. And feel free to get out there, play your game. If your game is solid with people, then people are going to start pointing you in the direction of a publisher that your game would work really good for. So that's another big thing that you really have to do when looking for a publisher, is just building up the connections with people in the industry. And don't do it just to try to get your game published. In general, you should be trying to educate yourself on the industry in general, so that way you're able to basically build up a good reputation with people. And if your game is good and solid and you're well educated and make it super well, then people are going to be trying to get your game published for you, And then the next thing here is following up. Once you found a publisher, once you've talked to them and you pitched your game to them and maybe they've asked you not to show it to anybody else, just making sure to have constant communication with your publisher and tell them, like, maybe they said, oh, we need you to change this little thing first. Make sure you're letting them know how that's going and make sure they know that things are going along with that. And then also, if you've given them the game, maybe they have your prototype, maybe they're working on it, just making sure you're following up, not being too crazy, like nagging about anything like that, because a lot of times publishers have really strict pipelines and your game might be about to be ready, but then it has to go into all of that stuff. And that leads up to the next thing is once a publisher has fully decided on their figure out when you're going to sign your game. And signing is a whole thing. This was something that I didn't know about at all when I went into board game design, was just the contracts and like the legal stuff behind board games and like what royalties you get and things like that. So you want to make sure you have your contract. Once a publisher decides that they're actually going to do your game, they'll give you a contract to sign for your game. And then there's pretty much standard contracts for the industry, which might be I'm not sure how different publishers are because once again, I have one game out there. But what I did do is I knew Emerson, I was good friends with, Emerson Matsuchi. I had him look over my contract that Gray Fox gave me. He checked a lot of that stuff out and like let me know what he thought, how it compared, because he had been with several other publishers before. And then I also had Justin Jacobson from Restoration Games because he used to be a lawyer. He knows all that stuff. They helped me clear up a couple things here and there. Didn't really change that much, but just let me have some ideas of things that I might want to add. A lot of things you want to look for is like, is this going to be just for rights in the US? Is it going to be for rights worldwide? How does that change? How does that differ? And then also, like, do you get copies of the game after the game is published and things like that? Is the publisher going to give you out your own copies? And then also, like, how long is the game allowed to be out of print before the rights revert back to you? Those sort of things. So you want to make sure all that stuff is written and your contract is solid, and make sure other people inside the industry, or at least a person that knows about how board games and royalties work, looks at your contract before you actually sign it. And then also just note that the royalties in the board game industry average anywhere from 5 to 8% on a game, and that's based on normally the wholesale sales of the game. So normally if you go to Kickstarter with your game, the margins are going to be much better, and then you'll be able to get the percentage off of like the margins for that. And then you'll have separate margins that are kind of like working for anything that goes to retail, because of course the publisher is going to be selling at wholesale to the store, and then from there it's going to be sent off to stores and things like that. So it's going to be a much smaller percentage. So you just have to keep that stuff in mind about what royalties you're going to get. Most designers are not getting rich here in the industry. Like, you have to have a mega hit like Ticket to Ride or Settlers of Catan or Pandemic to be able to be super massively rich, or Gloomhaven, you know, to be able to just be blowing the doors off things here in the board game industry. Most people are making pretty meager money, and most board game designers, like big name board game designers, haven't quit their day job. They're still doing their current job, but they're still getting out there and getting these cool designs out there. But yeah, so just keep all of that in mind, and really it's just the passion for making that you're getting your game out there. You have this idea in your mind that you really want to see people hitting their tables so they can have fun with it. And it can be a cool way to break off into the industry, because once you have multiple games out, or maybe you have a line of games, and then you can really look at being a professional game designer. Anyway, so yeah, that is a little bit about pitching and publishing and signing your game. Let me know down below if you have any more tips for pitching a game, or any tips or tricks for figuring out which would be the right publisher for your game. Make sure to leave those in the comments down below. Hopefully this is helping you guys out. This is getting even deeper and deeper into the design steps and past your normal playtesting and designs and things like that. But hopefully this is a lot of the information that I knew nothing about, because I didn't see many videos, if any videos, on like the actual like ideas about how to pitch, or ideas about signing contracts and things like that, which was a thing that I really had to reach out to people. And that's another reason why networking and having connections in the industry is a big thing. Just be friendly with people. Everybody wants to be here to play board games, so just play board games with them, and not just your games. Play everybody's games, share time together. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me here. I've been Roy Cannaday, and I'll see you on the next one.